Good evening. I am Lisha Dore, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to One on One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we took a break from our regular Tuesday program and turned our attention towards culture, covering the carnival activity. And if you have been following us on social media, we posted some very exciting, well-received content. We would have covered Flavor, the Carnival Kings and Queens, the Young King competition. We would have covered Regional Carnival, and last week, Saturday, Champs and Concert. And let me just say, Carnival was wonderful this year. It was indeed a bumper carnival. I'm sure Donny will agree with me because Donny was on the ground with me as well. The
Most of
Minister of Culture, the Honorable Michelle Benjamin, she did promise a bumper carnival. And I want to say she certainly delivered. It was great. It was not only just a fantastic cultural experience where everybody enjoyed themselves, but it was a very, very safe carnival. So I want to just congratulate the Minister of Culture, the Honorable Michelle Benjamin, the National Carnival Commission chaired by Mr. Peter Canhai, and everyone else who made it such a fantastic experience, the protective services, the local government workers who did a fantastic job cleaning up. I really have to say there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes for Carnival that you won't know unless you get involved. But all in all, a truly fantastic experience. I can say we are looking forward to it already. 2027 is going to be even bigger and better. But now, getting back to our regularly scheduled program, we are going to turn our attention to agriculture. And I would like to welcome you to our fourth installment of the Farmers Forum. I believe it's number 4. And it is a forum, that is doing very, very well. Agriculture is so important to the development of our country. Two of the things that we want to push as much as we can on this platform is culture and agriculture. So stay tuned and look forward to more of our programs and content in those areas. Right, my presenter tonight is none other than my esteemed co-host, agripreneur consultant and farmer, Mr. Donny Rogers. And Donny has done some very interesting research. He's going to be sharing his insight from the study that he did between production levels and food prices. And not to jump the gun, but Donny, you were telling me that increased output would have occurred after April 2025. And that, from your research, from the data that you would have collated, contributed to general decline in prices, right? So I don't want to jump the gun, but more or less that is what we're going to look at tonight. And Donny has some very interesting data to share with us. Now, coincidentally, April 2025 coincides with a change in government in Trinidad and Tobago. So that would be interesting. Is it that the government policy, the government being a more motivational type of government, being more on the ground, listening to people more? That's my opinion. Now, guys, I know you all could disagree with me if you want. That's just my opinion, right? Is it that all of these factors would have contributed to that increased production we are seeing? So I'm very interested to hear what Mr. Rogers has to say tonight. So guys, stay tuned. We have a very engaging, informative discussion. Now, I know these kinds of conversations may not be as exciting as Marshall or Patrice on stage, but they're very, very necessary for building the nation, right? So I want to encourage you guys. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. Please share the link and tell your friends and family about this program. It's, we do get, I always say, content that you will get nowhere else in Trinidad and Tobago on this platform. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to your viewers who are joining us on Zoom, on social media, members of the media who will tune in tonight. As I always say every week, we want the session to be interactive. So please actively participate. Raise your hand if you want to make a contribution. Use the chat. So when it comes to agriculture, we have no problem with people being interactive. It's always one of the most interactive programs that we've had on this platform, and that's because I think people are so passionate about agriculture. So without further ado, let me pass you over to my co-host, my presenter for tonight, Mr. Donny Rogers, who will carry on with his presentation. Donny, over to you.
Good night, Lisha. Good night, everyone. Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you loud and
Right.
clear.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, I mean, agreed. I may not be as exciting as seeing Marshall run up on stage or seeing Iowa and Swappy and them performing, but after Carnival is back to business. Carnival may be about drinks, but after Carnival, you have to go back to food, or at some point in time, you have to go back to food. So, hence, we are here today. Right now, before Carnival, actually, in January of this year, I would have compiled some research, some statistics that I was working on over a period, and the data pointed to something, and I would have gone through a verification exercise and stuff like that, which leads us to today. So let me share my screen and get this presentation up. Right. So are we seeing it?
Yes.
Right. And it's on full screen now. Right. So, okay. So forget this is about the commodity price and production analysis 2024 versus 2025. Because when we do this, it should be comparative. We should have some sort of benchmark as to what we are comparing it to. Right. So, just the overview, this study is geared to highlight the performance in the agricultural sector as it relates to the production volumes and prices. Now, when we look at what really affects people, um, it is the volumes and prices. Because if you don't have enough goods, obviously, is a problem. And if the prices are too high, a next problem. So, in looking at it, I think this is the most commonsensical way to actually put across to the listeners, how things have changed. The data from here, I mean, and with me, Lisha, I always go into the context of the data and the verification of the data. This data was derived from government publications from NAMDEVCO, as well as daily statistics that would be published from various sources. So the figures were taken from NAMDEVCO, where we would have gotten benchmarks, we would have gotten averages, and that was correlated against other publications that would show volumes and prices in the same context, and we would have arrived to our position. So if anybody were to examine the historical data that NAMDEVCO would have on their website, it will be in line with what is being presented today. So the integrity of the data, I mean, you know me, I wouldn't operate with skewed data. The integrity of the data is there for anybody to verify. This presentation is based on four major food categories: root crops, commodities, and commodities would mean like seasonings, and sorry, not commodities, condiments, which would mean like seasoning and spices, leafy vegetables, and vegetables. From these groups, selected items were identified on the basis of those which are most frequently used, consumed, and purchased. By extension, these items selected for this study are those which are most impactful on citizens' pockets. Because, it's all nice and good to present something, but I think citizens now, in light of where things are more interested in how does this affect me, my buying power, my pocket, my spending money, the affordability of food and stuff like that. This study highlights the comparative data on prices and volumes for May to December of 2025 versus 2024. This would be in 2025 would also reflect the first 8 months of the government being in power. Right? So let's go on with root crops, price, and production trends. Are you all hearing me and everything is clear, right?
Yes, Donny, all good, all good.
Right. Good. Wonderful. So root crops. Um, Here we have a basic graph that shows the blue would be 2024 and the orange, I'm suppose, would be 2025. Um, Here we have it's clearly defined where we are seeing prices generally decrease from 2024 to 2025 very substantially, in some regards, 30%, 40%, and even above. We have examined carrots, cassava, dasheen, ginger, sweet potatoes. And as I said in the introduction, these, from a root crop perspective, these would be where most of the consumption lies when you look at buying pattern and volumes traded, right? So this group would really form the cohort that would really affect someone's pocket the most. And we are seeing here carrots went from $15 to 11.72, a big difference. Another big difference would be ginger, 67.14 to 51.67. Dasheen went from 13.48 to $10.08. Sweet potatoes would have gone from $10.73 to $9.71. These prices are very significant. Minimum here, we are looking at 10-15% decrease in prices, which is very good when it comes to someone who is on minimum wage and has to feed a family. When we look at the production volumes now, we would see that across the board, we have had increases in production. Now, we were very specific in looking at the figures. So, I mean, the figures speak for themselves. In carrots, for example, we have a decrease of about 200,000 kilograms. Now, I must say, carrots are not produced in Trinidad, but it is a highly consumed item. It is an item that is purchased every day, notwithstanding your pocket, and that is why we decided to represent it here as well. Cassava, there was a notable increase. Dasheen, a very notable increase. Ginger, almost marginal. And sweet potatoes, we have seen a significant jump as well. Now, at any point in time, if anybody have any questions, Lisha, you could just prompt the question and I would answer it if it's based on a specific item. Okay. So when we look at the information behind it now, average price for key root crops generally declined. The production volumes have increased, which is indicative of improved and expanded cultivation. When we look at the dynamics, inverse price volume relationship suggests prices have acted in accordance with demand and supply criterion. It's a simple thing. It's the basic laws of economics with regards to demand and supply. So supply increase, prices will decrease. Now, what this means creates the benchmark for further activities, such as value added activities, both upstream and downstream activities with regards to agro processing, be it small or large. And what we have seen here as it relates to root crops, um, we are seeing the basis being created where policy now has to come in place and support the further development. Volume increase. I mean, obviously, yes, as I just said, we have general decreases, increases in volumes. Price decreases range from between 10 to 60%. Market pressure and implications. Increased supply is pegged to the price declines. Urgent producer to consider strategy adjustment, which specifically means entering into contract farming relationship with exporters and processors. Now, why is contract farming relationships important? For too long, I have heard farmers complain about they're making money sometimes and not making money at other times. Sometimes they are not making money at the critical times where you need it, such as Christmas time, Diwali time and so forth, for various reasons. I am of the opinion that the key for a sustainable livelihood lies with a proper mixture of avenues for sales for farmers. And my position is very simple. Contract farming can bring significant value to a farmer. Contract farming ensures that when the price is very low, you have a guaranteed supply. You have a guaranteed price for your produce. On the flip side, when the price is very high, there will be an ethical expectation that you still supply the market. Now, when you look at it over the course of a year, it works out. More importantly, is that it means a farmer now can project his income, can enjoy steady forms and streams of income, and he can be a lot more sustainable. He could plan better, especially from a financial point and so on. So we will go on to condiments. Now, we are looking again at some of the most used items. Sive went from 61.14 to 51.16, almost a $10 drop in prices over the same period of May to December 24 to 25. What we are seeing here with hot peppers, the price increased, and we'll see why afterwards. Shadow Benny, there was like about a $1 difference, but the price still decreased. And thyme, there was about a $6, sorry, a $4 to $5 decrease. Now, we have to remember, although we may see um, somewhat marginal decreases, it is a decrease over a wide period. And generally speaking, we have come out from a period of just under 10 years where we have not been seeing increases in productive volumes or decreases in prices. It has always been my position, and I've said this on many platforms for years, that in the agricultural sector, our productive output is still about 45 to 50% below pre COVID levels. So our output as of last year would still be below the 2019 volumes that we would have experienced. That means that we have not recovered from the pandemic from an output perspective. Thankfully, we are now starting to see that turnaround, which I mean, I think on in every sphere when we look at it is a welcome position. Now, when we look at the productive volumes, we have seen shadow benny increase exponentially. Sive, there's almost marginal. Hot peppers, we've seen a decrease. Now, this data being presented should be used by the authorities to actually guide and shape policy. Now, what this basically means is that you have one volatile item in the condiment section, and that is hot peppers. And that is because of the types and level of demand that you have for hot peppers. Sometimes the demand is very, very high, and sometimes it drastically decreases. So, again, one thing that could help that is contract farming, which will ensure that the agro processors and those engaged in value addition activities can have stable prices. Now, when prices fluctuate too much, you will end up in a situation where it is not attractive for those who are engaged in value addition. When we talk about value addition, we also talking about export. If we can't be competitive on the export market, we cannot earn forex. I don't think I have to explain what that means if we can't earn forex. In the agricultural sector, we have a really good opportunity now to be the driver for both the savings and the earnings of Forex. The savings of Forex can come from increase in production, like what we are seeing now, to offset our food import bill. And the earnings of Forex is as we increase production, decrease prices, and stabilize the two, it now empowers our processors to actually become more competitive on the export market, leading to higher forex earnings for the country. I hope that was clear to everyone who is here this evening. Right. So this is just the general comments on the category. And Lisha, I will make the presentation available to anyone who wants it afterwards to really go in and take a read and have a better understanding of what we're speaking about today. So if anybody wants the presentation, just indicate that in the comment section, and I will ensure Lisha will send it to you all. Right. So now we go on to leafy vegetables trends and insights. So here now we have lettuce, pak choy, the open callaloo bush, spinach, cauliflower. We have seen decreases in 4 out of the 5 items. Pak choy, if we look at it from a practical perspective, we still have some issues with the giant African snails. Both for the condiments and the leafy vegetables, giant African snails, and I've made this, I've spoken about this publicly as well. And Marlon, you will agree with me, especially in Jerningham, because this is where the information first came from. We have seen a shift in feeding patterns in the giant African snail. So now we have seen giant African snail um, eat seasonings, even shadow benny. But one of the things that they really go for is the leafy vegetables, such as pak choy and stuff like that. So when we look at how pak choy has performed in the market, we have seen it almost become stable, but with a slightly higher price. And what will accommodate for that, or what will account for that, sorry, is the fact that you still have issues with the giant African snail. Um, and generally, we are seeing the price decreases across the board. Even cauliflower has moved from 31.94 to 26.23, which is very significant. Now, remember we just spoke about pak choy, and pak choy became more expensive. Here we are seeing that in 2025, the volumes increased, which is against what we just said with regards to, the higher the output, the lower the price. In this case, we have a situation, we have a higher output, but we have a very invasive pest that has been, giving farmers a lot of trouble over the last couple of years. But again, I would like to say that we are starting to see that turnaround. The increase in callaloo bush is a very good sign for exporters. A couple of years ago, there were some serious problems with regards to the volumes, and we are seeing that changing now. So this is an indication. So at least in this category, we are becoming a little bit more competitive, or we should become a little bit more competitive on the export market as well. Cauliflower increased, spinach as well increased. So I wouldn't really go into the narratives of everything because we spoke quite a bit on these. And as I said, if anybody wants a copy of the presentation, you could feel free to let us know. So the last item now would be vegetables. Now, during the period, we have seen one item, which is Bodhi 5 pound bundles, actually increase over that period. And again, the data and the presentation of correlated data and research is meant to guide the policymakers to look at where things or where focus should be placed or where some sort of intervention needs to come in to find out, okay, what's going on here? What are the dynamics behind it? Let's look at putting some resources into something here. And resources, don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be financial resources. It could be in terms of policy. All right. So this is the point of these sorts of presentations and research. It is meant to guide the policymakers as well. So we are seeing some very nice decreases in price. In pumpkin, we are seeing an increase. And I will say this without fear. I believe pumpkin farmers deserve a better price. It is my opinion that what we are seeing here with pumpkin is the movement towards price stabilization. And in that phase, we will see prices move up and down until they settle. And it is actually, in my opinion, a positive sign that pumpkin farmers wouldn't be getting 50 cents a pound after all that hard work. To me, I mean, I'm not a pumpkin farmer, but it is heartbreaking to see a farmer get 50 cents and 75 cents per pound for an item after they have worked so hard to produce it. I remember just a few months ago, Marlon, I believe it was you or some other farmers. Farmers had preferred to leave the pumpkin in the field. It just made no economic sense and created no value in spending the money to harvest it. You know, um, sweet pepper, for one of the first periods now, we are seeing decreases in sweet pepper. We are seeing decreases in medium sized tomatoes. These two things are very significant. Generally, with these two items, those prices do really decrease to this level. We are seeing significant decreases in the prices of plantains and same as well. So when we go on to the production volumes now, we see that Bodhi has kind of, kind of almost the same, which means that production in that specific item stayed at one level. Same, almost the same thing. Melungeon had a pretty okay performance. We are seeing a significant increase in planting that will obviously give credit to the decrease in prices. Pumpkin volumes as well increased. Sweet potato about the same thing, and tomatoes also saw an increase. Now, although sweet potato all remained almost the same, we did see a price reduction, which is a very good sign. So, right. So, conclusion. This study clearly indicates that farmers have gained the confidence in order to increase production. This confidence is not based on the receipt of incentives or grants. Now, after April, there were many complaints that grants and incentives were put on hold. For whatever reason, we wouldn't get into that. But the data is showing that without the grants and the incentives, the productive output generally increased, which created the situation where the prices have generally decreased. So this is saying, the data is saying that the use of incentives and grants are not really hinged on the actual development of the sector. Now, don't get me wrong, the grants and incentives are useful, and maybe this information can be used to gauge where exactly those grants and incentives can be used to create more impactful results to the farmers, right? And I want you all to understand what I'm saying here. Instead of giving a grant and there's no follow up and no real hinge on how it affects the the national economy as it relates to the sector, maybe we could put some focus on how the grants and incentives can work for a farmer to now develop economies of scale. And by that is just a fancy word of saying to create the internal efficiencies where the cost of production can decrease for a farmer on his farm just based on what he's doing. And that may be a quite of a lengthy conversation, which is not really geared for tonight. Um, the exponential grant of land leases. Now, we all know it is, I believe it is about approximately 1,000 leases have been distributed to date over the past, what, 10 months or so. That is very significant. The announcements of expanded training, which went on to, as I said, this presentation was done in January, and it was February that the training actually started. So, with the announcement of training, the outreach that was personally undertaken by the minister, as well as the immediate infrastructure drive that the current administration embarked on immediately after coming into office, would be the contributing factors to do the two things that we saw here today: increase production and lower prices. Volumes have been increased, prices stabilize and reduce are all indicators that both upstream and downstream activities can become financially viable, which will ensure the sustainable development of the sector. So, there you have it. I hope, just let me just stop sharing my screen. Right. So I hope I didn't go too fast. Sorry, my voice started to give out there. Um, but any questions anyone will have based on that?
Now, guys, I want to open the floor. I see several farmers here with us, and although I have my questions, I want to give you all the opportunity, being practitioners in the field, to ask your questions, make your comments. I'm sure there are lots of thoughts on what Donny would have presented. I very much would like to hear from you guys. One of the things I find very interesting that Donny said is despite the grants and incentives being put on hold, production increased. So what would have really led to that? Maybe some of you all could give us your input, weigh in on that.
You see, most importantly, Lisha, is that these figures were studied over a long period, over 8 months.
Hmm.
So we can't say that it was a knee jerk reaction or a temporary reaction. It was a study over 8 months, which is very significant, right? And it was benchmarked over the same period of the preceding year. So I think, when we look at it from that perspective, it really gives a realistic picture and a direction of where things are going to be now.
All right. Well, so folks, if anybody would like to, as I said, ask a question, make a comment, please feel free to raise your hand. Also, you feel free to use the chats, right? I'm just gonna go into a few comments I'm seeing on the chats here. Somebody said that contract farming, Calvin. Welcome, Calvin. Thank you for joining us. We missed you for a few weeks, but I'm glad you're back with us. Contract farming often disadvantages smallholder farmers through various things, unequal bargaining power leading to unfair terms, etc., etc. So that's one of the comments. I also see someone speaking about price control provisions as the products are perishable. So Donny, if you want to weigh in on those things.
Well, contract farming, I mean, I understand what Calvin is saying, And yes, in the past, there have been a predatory type approach, if I could use that word, towards contract farming. Um, but what I would say now is that there are very ethical buyers on the market. There are very large processors who will give a fair price throughout the year. And they have even moved to examining the periods where the prices kind of spike and offer a slightly higher price to the average price that they would offer during the year, just to ensure that the ethical reciprocation on the farmer is actually, displayed. So yes, I agree. um, I'm seeing the comment from your lips to God's ear. I hope so, Calvin. Um, but I can't say, no, I can't call the company's name that I would say are very ethical. I don't want anybody to say I'm promoting any companies here, but there are very large buyers who will offer very fair prices. In most cases, they offer prices that um, are not on the minimal side, right? They really do offer fair and average prices. And I think once farmers um, engage the negotiations with buyers properly, um, you wouldn't have any problems. Farmers should also belong to a farmers group. There's a saying, there's power in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll call Marlon name again. Marlon has been doing exceptional work with regards to the development of farming groups across the country, right? Not just with his group, but with farming groups across the country. So, Calvin, I will say get into a farmers group, um, develop a farmers group, and let those numbers collectively speak and work for you. You know, that would be the best way I could respond to that.
Tony, I want to ask you what happened with hot peppers and body because we seem to have seen a reverse in the trends, right? The
Correct.
trends, according
Mhm.
to your data, generally there was increased production and that led to a decrease in price, which is what that is the normal sort of response. But that was
So,
the opposite for body
correct.
and hot pepper. So what really
So
went on with body and hot pepper?
for hot peppers is a very contentious item, right? Um, Demand always outstrip supply, always. Yeah. I personally know of very large producers who do pepper sauce and stuff like that. And I remember a couple years ago, the head of purchasing called me, and in December of that year, when pepper sauce is sell like crazy, they were short of 150,000 pounds of pepper. Yeah. The value to a farmer for 150,000 pounds based on a contract farming price would have been about $2 million. Yep. In December,
So
now the
you're telling me then, I mean, pepper is the thing to get into.
yeah, yeah. So what you will see with pepper is that, Trinis, we like to cook with pepper, right? I mean, let's call it as it is. So when there are periods of or when there are periods of higher activity, or when demand has increased, the demand is increased exponentially, right?
Wow.
And no matter how much peppers we plant, demand always outstrips supply. Now, what this says basically is that I wouldn't tell people just to go and expand and do 10 acres at a time. I will say, again, engage into contract farming, because we have producers who can't get a stable and steady supply. Um, Even you could, I mean, in various countries, you have um, producers who actually get into things like pepper mash. In foreign countries, you have farming associations who get into downstream activities. So they would have this thing, what you call it, a cooperative, and they will qualify for certain incentives and stuff like that. And they will start to actually do pepper mash, which now becomes an export item. And pepper mash, pound for pound, is more valuable than crude oil.
Wow. Wow.
Significantly more valuable than crude oil, right? Significantly, right? So when we look at the requirements it would take to invest into either upstream or downstream activities, or let's break it down and say value added activities, the returns on it is, I mean, it's very good, right? Now, I wouldn't tell a farmer just to go and plant and then you have peppers on your hands. Use a hybrid approach and have a certain amount of your produce go towards contract farming that will give you a stable and steady income throughout the year, and dedicate a certain amount of your field to sell on the open market. That is the best approach a farmer could take, because that will do two things at the same time. It will give the farmer a higher income, and it will have him benefit from when prices are higher, but it also protects him when the prices are low, right? It also promotes stable and steady supplies and prices for those who want to use produce to export. Because if we don't engage in a behavior or activities to promote the development of export, we're going to still be in the same situation next year and year after. And we're only going to be complaining about why we do our forex. But
Yeah.
but we can behave in a way, we can operate in a way that we could tell ourselves we have done our part to create any change with regards to forex. And I believe that farmers need to do that. The farming sector, the agricultural sector, no pun intended, remains the lowest hanging fruit to create any change with forex. I've always said that.
And Bodhi.
Right,
What went
Bodhi.
on with Bodhi?
Now, bodies stabilize, but when you now what the presentation didn't really have space for is looking at the traded volumes. When we look at the demand, somehow the demand increased for body, right?
Well, that's
So we
good
had a
though,
situation.
because that is a good
Yeah,
thing because Bodhi is very good for you. It's a healthy
exactly.
food item, so that's good. I'm glad to hear that the demand for Bodhi
Right.
increased.
So right. So we are seeing increased production but a slightly higher price. And that says that the demand increased although the volumes increased, right? So it tells farmers now, don't go and plant 10 acres of body, but have a steady output every month.
All right. Well, I am seeing Trini to the bone with his hand raised. Trini, can you unmute, please, and go right ahead?
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Um,
Good afternoon.
I joined kind of late when you started showing that document. I'm not even sure of the name of the document. Please share it with me on WhatsApp. Um,
Sure, sure. Just send me a message and I'll send it to you.
um, Talking about agricultural production for export,
Hmm.
what what do we actually produce to export now? Many years ago, which is close to about 30 years ago. Um, my father started some doing pineapples with the intention to sell it to national cannas. But the prices that you got on national canners now, mind you, I'm talking about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything has changed. The prices that we were getting at national canners were less than half of what you would get by selling it on the side of the road to people who retail. So, how many farmers actually are producing to sell, to be processed, to export, to
Okay.
actually sell, to produce something that we can export? Now, coming back to your pepper mash and at high prices, are there anybody actually exporting pepper mash in barrels, or is it just people like Bertie's making pepper sauce and putting it in bottles, and Matuks making pepper sauce and putting it in bottles and exporting that?
Well, I don't think, I could be wrong, huh? But I don't think we export pepper mash. Just
Why?
because,
Why?
right, I'm going to explain that. Just because over the last 9.5 to 10 years, our productive volumes did not improve. So basically, from 2019, which is like pre COVID, up to last year, we have not seen um, the recuperation from COVID. So we were still about 45 to 50% below pre COVID levels. Now, if our productive levels were that low, it means that there would be a huge void on the local market to fill. So, and once there's a huge void, you will also have higher prices. Now, you could remember over the last few years, pepper was almost king. I remember once a
No,
very
no, I want you to bring in that facility we have down at Maruga there in Edward Trace.
right,
Because I have
which is
visited
the
that.
agro processing
Correct. The
facility, right? Yeah,
agro processing facility
mhm,
that cost of many $1 million.
yeah, yeah.
Now I have visited that facility. I've never been allowed in to the gate, but I've visited many times. And the guard at the gate showed me packets of jub and all sorts of nonsense, small products that they produce there that already being produced by Sunshine Snacks and all these people.
Hmm.
But what
Oh,
agricultural products do we produce there? Is there a pepper mash machine to process pepper so that if a farmer like me decides to go into, okay, I'm going to uh, put put down some acreage in pepper, will I be able to process it? If I'm going to put down some acreage in pineapples, will I be able to process it for export?
okay, so I think that because of where our requirements are now, the first thing, uh, Trini, you mind lowering down the volume, or you are getting a
Oh,
feedback from
yeah,
that video.
yeah.
Um,
I was watching Parliament too.
yeah, when we look at, now, remember I spoke about two things. I spoke about the savings of forex, and I spoke about the earnings of forex. I believe that one of the easiest things we could do is save forex. Earning forex comes at a little bit more, I would like to say, a costly exercise, because we would have to invest into certain things, right? There are a lot of places that asking not just for GAP, but global GAP certifications, and I mean that's a different conversation. And they're asking for, goods and food to be produced under certain conditions, which require capital investment. That is why I'm saying our focus should be placed on producing items that specifically reduce our food import bill. And if we look at that, our food import bill right now is just about 1.1 billion US dollars, which is about 7.3 billion TT, right? So let's say a billion US dollars. um, based on what that food import bill is made up of, um, there are many items in that list that we could be producing here that we have stopped producing.
No, no. Let me stop
Now,
you with that.
hold on a second. There are items that we could be producing here that we don't traditionally produce.
Yeah, but there are items on the food import bill that we produce, and it's still on the food import bill being sold at lower prices. We import chicken, we import fish, we import avocados from Colombia and up the islands.
Right.
That is where we can fix our food
Right.
import bill.
So let me speak about avocado. And as I said during the course of my presentation, this is why these sorts of studies and data and presentations are important, because it should pave the way for the policymakers to look at where we are to create the change. Now, when we look at avocado, we do not have the variety of avocado that bears all year. And you'll be surprised with this. That variety of avocado is grown right up the road in the Dominican Republic,
Correct.
right? But we don't have it here. So it's tolerant to our climate, right? But we don't have it here. Now, whilst we say that, there was a huge exercise by the ministry where I believe it was about 1,000 or so avocado trees that were given out by the minister to farmers that would work to increase production. Now, avocado is not a short term crop. It will take 3 to 4 years till you start to see a difference. By the fifth year, you will see a proper productive volume, being recorded. But simple things like these, they weren't done before, but they are actually they have been done already here. Within the first few months, and I mean the minister has to be commended for this. Within the first few months, um, I believe it was 1,000 trees that were given out to farmers across the country. Right? It was televised, it was on the newspapers and the news and
Yes,
stuff like that.
correct.
So we are seeing the change, and we are seeing the move towards creating the change for these items. Uh,
What he gave out was the hybrid variety from Dominica that you spoke about earlier.
no, no, they were grafted by the La Reunion propagation station. If we have to get the variety from the Dominican Republic, it would take a lot longer because they have to come in, go through quarantine, they have to be propagated. Then after they propagated, then you have to graft them. It will take a long time. But with the varieties that we are accustomed to, we are seeing a large amount of trees being distributed to farmers. Now, that is an immediate um, resolve to an extent. But if you really want to get to the meat of it, the varieties out of Dominican Republic is something that we could surely look at, right? Um, but at least we are seeing work being done to create that change, right? There are certain things that we will have to import. There are certain things that we cannot produce here to the level of what is required. Grains, we cannot produce wheat and soybean and those sorts of things to the level where um, it is produced in other countries because you don't have the land space for those items. For instance, in order for soybean to come in at a good price, you need at least 20,000 acres to be under production at any one point in time, right? We cannot put 20,000 acres towards soybean for one rotation, right? We have what 90,000 acres of arable land that we could put into well, that we could use for agriculture. So to put that towards 20, so to put 20,000 acres towards soybean may not bring the kind of financial or economic return as compared to putting 2,000 or 3,000 acres towards rice, and that will offset our import bill by 85%. Right? So there are things that we will have to import.
Yeah,
That,
but we have to break the lifestyle of the people, first of all, who like to buy the parboiled rice and all the imported rice.
well, once we could get the productive volumes up, personally, I don't think it is all that necessary to break habits, because the habits that we have can create markets for people to go into. Let me give you an example. Um, I grew jalapeno peppers. The jalapeno peppers were bigger than the imported jalapeno peppers that that we have in Trinidad. I pickled them. They lasted just as long, but they tasted better, right? I mean, I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but you have a fresh pickle compared to a pickle that was on the shelf for a while, then it spent how much weeks on the sea, then it went to a distributor, then it goes into the supermarket shelf. You're talking about 4 or 5 months after it's manufactured, then it come in here. But if we look at pickled jalapeno and we look at the volume to what we import, we could create a sustainable income for about 50 people at least, just in one product. If we look at coriander or cilantro, when the large supermarkets, I can't call the names, on a Thursday, they will get imported coriander. Well, coriander, it's not grown here. If you're not in the supermarket on a Thursday, you're not going to get any Friday morning. And I sold for 20 something dollars a bunch, right? It requires a greenhouse to grow in which people are putting out money to invest in agriculture. Right? Let's face that. Generally, people with a steady market, with a good potential, will invest in agriculture. Right? Going into cilantro, you could make 25 to $30,000 a month, just with one item that is not going to take acres. If you have a lot, one lot, you could make that kind of money out of cilantro if you do it here. So when we look at the potential is there. But we have to understand that is not every single thing we could stop importing. We could never stop importing fish because they are because of migratory patterns.
We
Because
are we
of,
are living on an island surrounded by water and fish.
right? But if we really harvest the fish that we require in the volume, we will have no fish left, right? So there are certain things that we have to import, and we have to understand that. We have to understand the dynamics of why we have to keep importing it. But there are certain things that we should not import. For instance, we import 350 million TT in milk every year.
We were producers of milk in
We
1956.
were net producer. No, we are not.
Nestle set up their factory in 1914 in the Caribbean and was importing milk from the Caribbean and our milk, and they produced and exported milk, coffee, cocoa, and other products.
Right. And now we have 7 brands of foreign milk on our shelves and a dwindling farmer base of dairy farmers. I'm a dairy farmer, so I could talk about that. Right. Our the last figures, we produce 625 mLs of milk per capita. That means just over half liter per person per year. So if we weren't important, that is what each person would be, that is what each person would have. 625 mLs of milk for the entire year. That is where our local volume is. But there's no reason why we can't create that change, right?
Mhm.
Imagine what 350 million TT converted in US would do if we were to increase production. And from my figures, from my study, in 6 years, in 5 to 6 years, if we develop the sector in a certain way, we could completely offset the imported milk.
I
All right.
just want to bring in here that the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism, they would have launched recently a Buy Local, Build Trinbago campaign, right? So Trini, I think leading into what you're saying, there is that push as well to sort of develop more of an
Mhm.
appetite for local goods and services, right? And we do have a lot of good things in Trinidad, things that really is worth us utilizing and promoting. So let me say the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Tourism does endorse what you're saying. And folks, those of you all who are listening, please go to their Facebook page and other social media sites and check out that campaign on Buy Local, Build Trinbago. I am hoping that we could maybe get the minister or at least Dr. Neil Gosai to come on the program to talk a little bit more about that particular campaign. Right?
Something something I want to suggest though.
Mhm.
That facility again down at Edward Trace in Maruga. It might be a good idea for we could have some of the farmers to have a walkthrough in that facility and find out what it is. So we farmers will know what they can produce to make use of that facility. If you understand, you get what I'm saying. If we know that they can
Yes,
process
I
what
agree. I would like a walkthrough of it personally.
correct, we need to
Right.
work. We need
So,
to work
My
towards having a walkthrough there.
Trudy, my position on that may be a little bit different. When we look at where the large or the bulk of the farming areas are, um, it's Moruga is really out kind of out of place to really go into. Right? I remember a number of years
No
ago.
place is too far in Trinidad, brother.
No, no, no. Let me give you an example. Let me tell you why. A number of years ago, I approached ETech and asked for, to rent, one of their facilities or something like that because I need to increase my production with regards to a small facility to allow me to do my processing, right? And they told me, well, the only place they have that is earmarked for dairy is Moruga. I said, well, so we can't get it anywhere else. It's like, no, Moruga is earmarked. And I told the
No,
manager
no,
that,
no. But let me stop you again. If they have the refrigeration facilities, that is why I'm saying we need to know what there is, what we have there, what infrastructure do we have to process whatever type of agricultural product.
okay, so hold on. Let me just finish. My point to him was that for a dairy farmer, that makes no sense because the dairy producing areas are Wallerfield, Carsonfield. The length of time it will take a farmer to drive to Moruga with milk, taken in consideration the bacterial content in milk doubles every 20 minutes. By the time you reach to the facility, your milk spoil. And that is why I'm saying it makes no sense. So we have to approach these things taking in consideration the technical nature of what we want to do, right? And if it comes to dairy, I will say based on that one point, you can never do dairy there unless it's a dairy farm that is very close to Moruga, in which, as I say, the main dairy producing areas are in Carsonfield and Wallerfield. Well, Carsonfield, Wallerfield, and Toure, which is even closer to Grandy, right? So I believe it is kind of out of place, but here the suggestion. In all the farming areas, we have lands that are not being used, right? That are not under production. Why don't we look at putting up um, uh, an agro estate in farming areas that could allow small producers to engage into um, value added value added type production and rent it out to farmers. And we're not talking about anything big and expensive, you know. We're talking about a shell that is at the size that is appropriate to somebody, because some of these shells just too big, right, for a small producer. And these are the things that hold back somebody from being in a cottage type industry to move into a small business. Sometimes the rent outside there is too much. You know what is available from e-tech, because of how e-tech traditionally operated, it's just too big for a small producer to take that step outside, right? And there are many technical issues that govern why, which again is just too long for this program. But anytime we could have a conversation on the phone and I could go into details with you.
Okay, I just want to do a quick time check. It is 9:14, so we tend to wrap up around 9:30. So that means there's about 15 minutes left. If anyone wants to make a contribution, ask a question, guys, please make use of the time. I am seeing some questions from Kazraj on the chat. Kazraj, would you like to ask these questions yourself, or should I go ahead and ask them for you? All right, so one of the questions from Kazraj is, can onions grow in quantities for local and export?
Onions can grow in Trinidad. There was a pilot project many years ago from Joe Perez. Um, he now has Caribbean Chemicals. The older heads would remember a television show on agriculture that Joe Perez used to have, right? And in that, I remember as a very young person, I remember there was a pilot project on onions and it was able to grow successfully.
Okay. So, Donny, there are two questions that I would like to ask you before we close up, right? One is, well, first of all, we're talking about production going up, prices going down for some basic food items. And this is a question that, those of you all who are on this Zoom could probably give us your feedback on. So again, production going up, prices going down for very basic food items. But is the average citizen really feeling relief then at the supermarket or the market because of this trend?
Right.
Can we really say that people are feeling relief?
So on Sunday night, I was at a function and I I met a very good friend of mine who is a very well-known economist who often comes on our program, and I was sharing my study with her, before. Because I mean, this is what you would do. You would run it off of somebody to see if you're going wrong, make sure that you're heading in the right direction and things like that, right? And when she saw me, she was like, "Hey, I was in the market, and it's really true." And she said that when she went to the market, and she is known for going to the market, right?
Mhm.
And she did indicate to me on Sunday that when she went to her usual Sunday morning market, she did experience lower prices. Um, I, 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 I would not put my neck on a block to say that goes out every single day to every single location, but at least from where these prices are showing over the 8-month period, prices have generally decreased. I wouldn't get into the unethical practices and things like that sometime by some people. Um, But I think that generally people are seeing the lower prices in the markets. Supermarket is a different thing, right? The
Mm-hmm.
supermarket prices are different. These prices deal with the markets, right?
Okay.
Because someone can quote a supermarket price that will be way more than a market price. And whilst, I mean, we can't tell people what to do or where to buy, but if you know you want to have some savings, I mean, I think it's generally accepted that in the farmers market that the ministry promotes, both at Queen's Park and in Shawanas, and I believe somewhere else there's a farmers market. Sorry, where? Arima? Yeah, I was just prompted. Arima. Um, you have a genuine farmers market. You have the farmers who produce that come out and sell their items early on a Saturday morning. And I remember years ago before COVID when my products used to be at the Queen's Park farmers market. Quarter past 5 in the morning, you're seeing everybody from Port of Spain and the West and all the, you know, certain percenters sitting down in the paddock area waiting for the farmers market to open,
Mm-hmm.
right? So consumers have to know and have to make the choice as to where they're shopping. I am not saying where to shop. I'm just saying that the choice is always on the side of the consumer because you have many avenues. I know many people. If you pass Shawanas by the Ministry of Agriculture's head office, every Saturday morning, the car park is full. So much so that Heartland Plaza car park is almost full as well on a Saturday morning, you know. And that is how people participate in the farmers market there. Obviously, if you're seeing that much people buying in one place, something going good, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
I mean, it might
yes,
be prices, right?
yes.
Right. So I think we as consumers must exercise our right and our options to create our own value, right?
Okay,
And
folks, now you remember you will be paying a higher price for convenience,
yeah,
so there
exactly.
is, yes,
Yeah.
there's always that balance that you need to weigh. I'm seeing another question here. Is hill rice export showing potential?
Moruga Hill Rice has been doing exceptionally well, especially from the point of sustainable agriculture. You know why? Because they could plant it between the trees and the forests, right? So much so that Moruga Hill Rice has gained the attention of the UNDP Jeff Global Environmental Fund, right? And they have been doing quite a bit of work with Moruga Hill Rice just because of the sustainability factor with Moruga Hill Rice. And as I said, with Moruga Hill Rice, you don't need to clear down anything. You do not need to clear the forest. They're planted in between the trees and the forest. Now, the European Union gives preferential access to products that do not require deforestation. So the Moruga Hill rice, if they go in that direction, can find themselves being very positively well received in the European Union.
That's excellent news. Maybe for one episode, we could actually do something on that Maruga Hill rice.
Yeah.
It's so,
Yeah.
to me, I find it exciting. Also cocoa, the developments in cocoa. Guys, we have some really exciting stuff happening in agriculture. So we'll have a lot to talk about. So Donnie, my final question for you. We looked at, well, I should say you looked at the data and presented it to us from May to December 2024, and you compared it to May to
20.
December 2025, right? And things look good. We saw an increase in production and some very basic food stuff that led, as you would expect, a decrease in prices. What I want to ask is, what is your prediction for this year? Do you think that trend will continue?
So, as it relates to consumer prices, in January, I did identify that compared to the previous years, the trends and the data and the statistics show that consumers will generally enjoy stable prices this year. I made that announcement before I actually ran these figures. So these figures are in support of that. When we look at it in the bigger picture, I think what we would need to do now is use data in a strategic way. Now, okay, so for the first time now in about 10 years, we are seeing the turnaround, right? Except for the COVID time when we went on lockdown. In the last 10 years, the only time we really saw increased production was during COVID, right? Because we had to produce. Global supply chains decreased, well, stopped. No food was coming into the country. And I always said that is the farmers of Trinidad and Tobago ensured that nobody was hungry during COVID, right? So the productive volumes increased during COVID. That was the only time over the last 10 years where the volumes were that positive. So we are now seeing the exit from uh, um, from that period where volumes were kind of stifled, volumes were decreasing. Every year we were seeing less and less production in some cases. So I think with that turnaround now, the policymakers need to come in at this strategic time and say, okay, if this is what this commodity is performing at, let's look at why, let's look at the support we need to do. In the presentation, I also said that this turnaround is also without incentives and grants. So imagine if you tailor make incentives and grants and not just give it out to everybody. Imagine if you use incentives and grants in a strategic way, in a sustainable way that could directly impact on the farmers' operations. Imagine what that would do. So I think on two sides. One, if we continue in this trend with farmers still having the confidence in the system, um, we will see increases in production. The increases in production can be supported with policy to see higher levels, right? As it relates to prices, I think because we're now coming out of a 10-year period, which is, I mean, a 10-year period is very significant. And to
Agreed.
just turn around now, because we are seeing minimum 10, 12, 15%, up to 60% um, reduction in prices, right? To see that turn around over 8-month period, which is a sustained period after a 10-year period of low productivity and higher prices, is very significant. But in looking at it, I think in going down the road, we could see prices stabilizing this year and we could see volumes increasing. But if we want to make that better, the support via policy is the sure avenue to bring that out.
Okay. So, Donny, it is 9:26 now, so I think we should wrap up. Guys, before we wrap up, though, I just want to let you all know that the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, they are offering free training. There is some training going on this week. I believe they are doing banana and plantain production. I'm just gonna click very quickly on their Facebook page. Yes, so banana and plantain production, seasoning and herbs production, rabbit production, home gardening, compost making. It is all free to the public. Please feel free to go on their Facebook page. You can sign up and do these courses. I think it is an objective of the ministry to train over 20,000 people, and very good courses are being offered. all in a boost, with the hope that this will boost our local agricultural industry. So please check it out. It is 9:27. Donnie, I don't know if you have any
If
parting
just
words for us.
just one thing I wanted to say as it relates to what you just spoke about the courses there, right? You know what is very significant about these courses that is different to before? The courses are being taken to the farming areas. If you look at where the course is being held, it's not being held at Farmers Training Center in Centeno, where farmers have to leave the farm and fight up and come to the back of the airport. The training programs are going into community centers and into
That's
farming
excellent.
areas.
It's excellent.
That is where you'll create the impact when you take the training to the farmers. You know, I mean, give Jack his jacket. Those sorts of differences and changes is what is going to drive the confidence, because the farmers going to feel a sigh of relief. They're going to feel appreciated that, hey, okay, the program's coming to we don't have any excuses. I see Marlon have his hand up.
Yes, yes. So Marlon, please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, good night, everyone.
Good night, Marlon.
Good night, Marlon.
Donny, when it come into the prices, yes, there's cheaper goods and there's an increase in production. But don't forget to the cost input that the
Yeah,
farmers. We had this discussion in my last meeting in Jerningham there. The input that we are taking to bring, let's say, one pepper, one pawpaw, it's very high.
mhm,
But then again, we are farmers. We are willing to lose to buy the bullet there and lose. The training courses, yes, there's a difference you are seeing in this regime here when it comes into courses for farmers. They are coming to the farming area. Jerningham was selected to have a course, a pepper course,
oh, nice.
starting in March. Hopefully, there's with NAMDEFCO, and it's nice to see the ministry has involved all these entities into merge them into one to help with the agriculture. So I could Lisha, I can invite you all if you want to do if you want to come in and do a little video to
Yes,
present it to
I
your
think that
program.
that would
Yep.
be great. Just let us know the date and we will be there.
Yeah. So let's take into consideration. Yes, there's a decreased sweet potato selling 150 a bag. I see 80 pound. The most expensive thing in the market right now will be what watermelon, $5 a pound wholesale, pawpaw. But the cost to bring of these, hold on, one of these things is very high. So we have. I hope next session in this program here we could educate the farmers and them of the cost in bringing one piece of produce.
Yeah, yeah. Now, also remember, Marlon, that when we talk about the cost of production, um, and we accept the cost of production is higher now, because of many different things, right? Sometimes it would be the availability of forex will influence the cost of production, because our agricultural inputs are generally imported, right? Um, I will say to an extent, we could use alternatives that are available locally to offset those costs. As well, there are certain things that we just can't escape. Snail bait is expensive. I see that affecting seasoning and pak choy and those kinds of things. We can't escape that, right? So that is why with some things, your cost of production, wouldn't really change and it might increase. But there are certain things that we could do, um, as I say, bring back the old time days, right? There are many things that we used to practice long ago that give us good yields. And Marlon, you was the person who told me about a certain mixture to use on my pepper trees, and that worked. And I can't see myself using any big set of commercial fertilizers, right? So we definitely have um, options in regards to looking at how we could try to offset a production cost. And then again, everything that we spoke about tonight also indicated on the need to keep pushing production. It is understood and accepted that the higher your productive output is the less per pound it takes to produce it. So again, it shows why we should push production. Even with this being, we have significant increases in production cost. I believe if we still push the production, naturally our production costs will decrease and we'll enjoy, better margins. As farmers, everybody work very hard and they will all enjoy a more sustainable livelihood.
All right, so I want to thank Marlon for that input. Marlon always gives us some very, very good input. Now, Donnie, I take it you have already made your closing remarks.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, okay. Well, guys, I want to thank our presenter tonight, my co-host. It's a privilege to call Donny my co-host. Our
Uh,
radio consultant farmer, Mr. Donny Rogers, who would have shared his insights from a study that he did on production levels and food prices using very credible data. It was good news. We heard some good news tonight. Production levels are going up, prices are going down for some very basic food items. And what Donny has shared with us is he expects prices to stabilize this year. So that all sounds very, very good. I want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us, members of the media. Thank you for your questions and comments. I am always grateful for the regular group that joins us every week, regardless of what the topic is. And we are going back to our weekly program now that Carnival is over. So, guys, I just want to say thanks again to everyone. Donny, thank you. Keep safe and join us again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of One on One. Take care and good night.
have a good night, everyone.